My full name is Robert Earl Parcell. I go by Bob Parcell, so most jumpers would know me by. And I grew up outside of Tucson, Arizona. Went to high school there and went to Flagstaff at Northern Arizona University with forestry as a degree. And during my time there, I was able to get on with the Forest Service most of the years, actually all of the years, and worked from California, 2 different seasons fighting fire, and that gave me a lot of experience. We had a lot of fire in the Northwest, in Oregon and Washington, and I had a lot of, so since that was the case, I was able to come back, and then the 3rd year, I was able to put in for the smoke jumpers, and at that time, I got them. And so I came to Missoula, riding a motorcycle of all things, all the way from Tucson, and got off of it and didn't even look at it for 2 weeks. I was so tired of riding bikes. And then I went through training in 1971. Kept coming back after that. I jumped all over the place. I jumped in, I guess my first fire jump was outside of Lakeview, Oregon. I remember that very well because I didn't know what state I was in. We took off from, I think it was like La Grande or somewhere in eastern Oregon, and we were flying toward California. We didn't know if it was going to be California, Oregon, or maybe something else. And you kind of sleep, and then all of a sudden they wake you up and get in the door, and they stuff a map in your pack, and it's got where they think the fire is and where you're supposed to take your gear to, and they put you in the door. Once they slap you, and away you go. And I remember the first time that I actually did the fire jump. Like I said, I didn't know exactly where I was, and I'm shooting for a spot, and I basically almost missed the spot, and I hit a logging road, an old logging road. And they had a tree that had fallen down, and it had spikes, basically tree limbs going up in all directions. And I hit right on that thing, right in my feet. I'm going, oh, I'm going to gut myself or something. And I came right down and slammed into that, both feet, fell back on the ground. Safe landing. That was my first landing with the jumpers. Anyway, in any case, I jumped for those 2 years, and then after college and I graduated, I went back and I continued to jump. So I jumped 4 years in a row, and I got married in 1972, I think it was. Yeah, or 1973, I'm sorry, 1973, I had to think about it at that time, and brought the wife up to Cottonwood, Idaho, and that was right outside of, very close to Grangeville. I was sent down there to boost their crew, and that's where I jumped as well. And let's see, then after that, 4 years, I went to the Marine Corps, officer, went to training in Quantico, went various places around the world. Okinawa was stationed, both coasts, Philippines, Palau, Japan, and so on. Came back after 5 years, I got out of the Marine Corps, came back to jumping again. So I jumped 2 separate 4-year hitches, early 70s and early 80s. And I jumped again in Missoula, worked out of planes. In those days, they would farm you out in the off seasons, the prior season and the after season. You would be farmed out to various districts that want to use you as labor. And so we would be out burning piles or slashing and that sort of thing, and doing a lot of the timber work. And so I worked at Plains, did that for several years, and then come to jump, and so on. And then I think it was 1982, decided I'd try law enforcement, came to law enforcement, put in for the sheriff's office. Like 9 months later, they called me and said, well, we have a position if you're available, and that was it. So I did, but I continued. As it turned out, I got in the sheriff's office, they found out I was a jumper and I was qualified, so they said, well, would I be able to continue to jump with the jumpers? So I was the only jumping deputy that I've ever heard of, ever in the country. And so I would go, and every year I would train with the jumpers, do the PFT, qualify, and then do what they call the units, the ground workouts and all the ground training. And then I would get the practice jumps, and then I was qualified to jump with the jumpers that year. And if there was a plane wreck, if there was an earthquake, if there was something in the backcountry, I could go and represent the sheriff there. So I did that for many years until the war came up in 1991 in the Gulf, and Iraq invaded Kuwait, and I was called up for the Marine Corps. And so I went at that time to do Marine Corps duty, and then came back from that and stayed on the jumpers, or stayed on with the law enforcement, and did the same thing again in 2001. The towers went down, and we were attacked. I was called up for 2 years at that time, and at that time, by then I was a colonel, and I went to Marine Forces Pacific, and became the head of the crisis action team for the general who is pushing material and men over to the Gulf. And so I worked for him for 2 years, at, like I say, at his headquarters, and then came back for 10 months, and I got another call for duty in Iraq, and they wanted somebody to control the police, to actually work with the police and get them back to snuff. And so that's what I did for a hitch in Iraq. We did, I was in Ramadi. We were all over the western Iraq, Baghdad, everything on the west. Ramadi, Fallujah, when we took Fallujah, I was there assisting on that. And then basically came back from that and had to retire after 30 and a half years in the Marine Corps and Marine Corps Reserve. 30 and a half years I retired and stayed on with the law enforcement. That's pretty much my careers. I had 3 careers.